In the question of what we are, we inevitably get caught up in a confusion between what we are and who we are, and not realizing that there is a very significant difference between the two. So what we are is one question, but who we are, isn't that a completely different question? When we look into this, which I will be today, that the answer to these questions, or your own discovery of the answer to these questions, lies in a very different area of all it is to be you in the world today. And so we start off with the very early parts of our life being nothing more than what we are. And that is, we're born as a baby, and before we ever learn to think about ourselves and invent who we are, we already have an innate quality of what we are. And that quality and the qualities that make up what we are and the abilities that make up what we are actually our most essential qualities, and that is our qualities to sense our own existence, to sense our environment. And when I say sense, I mean sense, not describe it, sense, not think about it, but to actually feel the presence of ourselves as we are existing, in what condition we're existing, what our needs are, and based on that, we interact with our parents, we interact with our world around us, but all of that interaction is still limited. And when I say limited, I should say restricted to the purest form of interaction, which is the expression from our known sense of our own needs out into the world and to the people around us who we expect to take care of those needs, i.e. our parents. And so even with our parents, we don't look at them through words, we sense them through the feelings that begin in ourselves and within our own needs. So our sense of our parents is not actually that disconnected, if at all, from our sense of ourselves. So our sense of ourselves is what we are, is known, and the knowing of what we are. Known in what we are, and it is the knowing of what we are. How we know we exist from the day we are born through to the day we die is actually in what we sense of ourselves. So our sense of ourselves, all of our inherent understanding, all of our ability to know what condition we're in because we either feel one way or feel another way, this felt sense of ourself tells us all about us and also all about our environment, and all this happens before thought ever becomes involved. And in that, we have a sense of ourselves that is all of our own, that is coming from and out of our own existence every second that we're alive. And that sense of ourself is also completely free of any insecurity, any fallibility in the sense of needing to improve on that. That is just knowing itself as it is, knowing ourselves as we are. And in just knowing ourselves as we are, there is only the needs that may be there felt in ourselves, and the reaching out to the world around us to fulfill those needs, or just being with those needs on the inside of us and fulfilling those in ourselves. And this is our natural state, that we are a sensory being, that primarily and before any thinking becomes involved, we are like any other animal on the planet, that what we are is a sensory being. What we are is a very, very sensitive receptor through all of our senses, through our skin, through every cell of our body, a sensory receptor to the world that we live in, and a sensory receptor of what it's like to be us at any second of our existence. So in that, we know everything there is to know about ourselves, and we know fundamentally everything we need to know about the world or the environment immediately around us. On top of this, as we learn to think, what do? We build ideas of ourselves out of that thinking. We're taught to think things about ourselves. We're told things about ourselves, not necessarily true things, but that's not known to us. We just take on these ideas, and we take on these ideas about ourselves, which are learned from the outside, and we live out our life, which becomes from the early age of 3 or 4 through to the age of 60 or 70 or 30 or whatever you've reached so far. That what does that become? That has become a continual building on who we are, which is impregnated or which is superimposed on top of what we are and into what we are. But what we are and who we are, very, very different. Very, very different. What we are is a constant, and we know it as a constant because the one thing that exists continually as long as we are alive is the sensations of the body of us and the functions of our sense organs automatically receptive to whatever their job is, to whatever they're picking up. And so this is an ongoing consistency from the day we're born to the day we die. And as we get older, these things start to break down for sure. And this is our journey into death. However, that is an ongoing automatic function that's all made up of what it is to be this living, breathing, feeling, thinking, intelligent organism that is in expression of itself is the same on the outside as it is on the inside, because all of its expressions are triggered by the life outside, which stimulates an expression from the inside coming into expression, showing itself and showing how it really feels in that environment or that situation without any sort of censorship from ideologies, from belief systems, from what we have been taught to behave like. And this, what we've been taught to behave like, senses this natural expression of the truth of ourselves and falsifies ourselves to behave in ways which become something different to what we are into that which we see as who we are, or that which is actually who we are. So who we are is changing all the time, whereas what we are is pretty much the same from birth to death. Who we are, the person we become, the person we enact out throughout our childhood is developed and defined by our environment, certainly, but also very much by our environment, what we have been taught to think and how we have been taught to think. What we have learned to think is specifically and most harmfully what we've been taught to think about ourselves. And so how we've been taught to think about ourselves is also derived from how we are treated by people in our environment, which determine how it feels to be us under the effects of that treatment, and then identifying with, oh, this doesn't feel so good, or I'm so bad, or I'm so stupid, or whatever it is I've been taught to think about myself. Then by taking on those thoughts ourselves, believing that they're our thoughts when they're not, they're somebody else's thoughts, we can continue to think such thoughts for the rest of our life, which then generate these feelings inside of the body of what we are that are completely alien to the body and untruthful. They don't really match up with what we are at all. So we end up living out this confusion of what we have been taught to think and believe about ourselves and the world, which define an experience of ourselves and the world that is actually untrue. Untrue in all ways. And so that untrue experience that is defined by untrue thoughts about ourselves and untrue thoughts about the world develops our perception of the world and the way we continue through our life. And that perception is also untrue. That perception is not the actual receptivity of the pure untainted sense organs that receive life as it really is, but it is the interpretation of our thinking of what we firstly receive in our senses, what we firstly receive through our senses, we then interpret according to our thoughts and ideas about that, and that is then projected out from our thinking, could cause us to see another person, to see the world, to respond to another person, to respond to the world in the way in which our perception is driving us. And that perception is actually our delusion. That perception is actually causing us to not actually know ourselves or our environment, what we sense initially, as it really was when it was first sensed by this highly intelligent organism of what we are. So what we are is a living, breathing, highly intelligent organism that operates within itself in a completely automatic way. It doesn't need thinking to operate. No animal on the planet, which is also the same as us, needs thinking to operate. It's already operating through the direct sense of itself, a sense of the life of the body. And the sense of the life of the body does not require any other alternative life or separate entity or separate mind thing or separate soul thing or separate spirit thing to generate life within it. It already is alive. It's alive in its own right. And this is something that's been greatly confused by the thinking people of the world for thousands of years, simply because they don't understand how the body itself functions, how it functions from a sensation in itself, through to the feelings, which are the expression of that sensation, through to the thoughts, which are further expressions of that sensation and feeling, through to the words, which are further expressions of that sensation and feeling, and through to the actions and interactions in our life which determine the life we lead. So what is determining all that? It starts as a sensation in the body of you, and that is the essence and the origin of every thought, word and action and feeling and interaction of your life. But not understanding that, we wonder how this thinking comes about. Not understanding the origin of thinking, we wonder how this thinking and this intelligence comes about, and we invent this separate thing that supposedly does the thinking for us, called a mind. And the mind is nothing. There's nothing there. There is no mind. No one's ever found a mind. So the mind that we have invented becomes who we are. What is this? So what is the mind in this sense that I'm talking today is nothing more than the complex and ever-changing story of the life that you've lived since you were born. So the memory of your life. At one stage in your life, you're a child, you felt like a child. Another stage in your life, you're a teenager and you felt like a teenager. Another stage in your life, you're an adult and you felt like an adult. Perhaps during your teenage years, you learnt to dance, and when you were dancing, you've had the feeling of being a dancer. And another person might have learnt to, ride horses, and he has the feeling of being a horse rider. And another person learns the mechanics of a car, and he has the feeling and the identification with, I'm a mechanic and I'm a builder and I'm a cook and I'm a this and I'm a that. And we start to identify with the things we do and lose the fundamental sense of what we are in the things we do. So the things we do are the stories of our life. The things we do are not us, they are the story of our life. And so we look back over the story of our life. How many different ways have we experienced ourselves to be? How many different people have we been? What are we like with our father or our mother or our child? What are we like with the person who's our superior? We're meek and mild. And the person who is our inferior, I'm talking culturally. Yeah, I'm not saying anybody is superior or inferior. I don't agree with that at all. It's not actually true. But what we live out in our life, if we have people on the high end of the run, and they look down on other people as being inferior. So how do they behave, or how do we behave when we're in that superior position? And how do we feel? We actually feel as though we're better than them. We actually feel as though we're stronger than them. And we treat them poorly. We treat them very differently to the people who we look up to as being our superior. When we're with our superiors, we're very respectful and very meek and very mild. When we're with our inferiors, we're arrogant and stupid and insensitive and uncaring. So which is us? Which person is us? When we're at work, we're a bully. When we go home, we're a soft, calm, sensitive person to our children. We're horrible to the people in the world during the day, and we're warm and caring to the people of our family in the evening when we go home, and on it goes. When we visit our mother, we visit our father, we turn into whatever persona, whatever story we had invented between us, between mother and son, mother and daughter, whatever it happens to be. What's the story that we've invented that we're going to role play when we come together? Yeah, and so we have all these different role plays and all these different stories, and we have many, 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 many stories which make up the story of our life. And over the years, this story gets bigger and longer and more complex. And how many stories do we outlive? How many stories do we live out? We outlive many, and we continue to live out others. And which story is us? So how many stories have we invented, or have we had invented between us, or we have come about between our role play between one another? How many stories are us, and which is us? Which person are we? There's so many persons here. There's so many people within me, and I act very differently. Which is real? So we see with all these personas, with all these stories, we are definitely not the same on the inside as we are on the outside, but having got so consumed and identified with the outside, these role plays that we have lost this deeper, solid sense of what we are. And what we are is most often nothing like who we express ourselves as in the world. So we live in a world that thrives on hierarchy. We live in a world that thrives on comparison. We live in a world that thrives on black and white thinking. And why do we have black and white thinking? Why do we have hierarchy? Why do we have comparison? What are these? So let's start with black and white thinking. What is black and white thinking? That is the thinking that makes up whatever persona we happen to be acting out in that role play, in that position in our life. Why does it need to be so black and white? The more insecure we are, the more black and white we become, because we're having to really limit our thinking to something that we can hold on to. We're becoming very stubborn, very confirmed, very solid in our thinking, because this is making up for an insecurity within how it feels on the inside of us. So the outside, again, is not expressing something that actually we are on the inside, other than its opposite. And this is still on the superficial level. This is still all about who we are, not what we are. So sticking with who we are, we discover that if I feel insecure on the inside for whatever reason, then on the outside I will come across as arrogant, confident, and strong, and dominating, and bullying. Why? Only because I'm making up for and covering up a strong sense of insecurity on the inside. And that strong sense of insecurity on the inside is because what is on the outside of being a strong, confident, arrogant person isn't real. It's not real at all. And the more I'm making up for what's on the inside of being insecure, then the more arrogant, the more black and white I will be in my thinking. Look at a religious person, two religious people from different religions. You can very much see black and white thinking happening there. This is correct. No, this is correct. No, I know. No, you know. No, my God is right. No, your God, my God is right. Yeah, it's just ridiculous, because they're lost in a superficial world of who they are, not what they are, who they are, being I'm a Christian, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Muslim, I'm a spiritualist, whatever it happens to be that I have identified with, in the struggle to feel somehow more secure than I really do on the inside. So that becomes my black and white thinking. And because I'm so insecure on the inside, I become very defensive and very arrogant on the outside. And I can't let go of my black and white thinking. I can't think outside of my tiny little box, because what happens if I think outside of my tiny little box? Being the Christian, being the Buddhist, being the spiritualist, being the successful man, the successful woman, my tiny little box. What happens when I think out of my tiny little box? I discover what inside of me is driving me to want that tiny little box. What is driving me to identifying with that tiny little box is that I have no sense of myself at all. It's all gone. That I feel completely lost, completely insecure, completely frightened, because in all of that thinking about who I am, which is making up the story of my life, I've lost the sense of myself in what I am. So who I am, which is all these stories that we have, becomes very insecure. And in that insecurity, we start to compare with other people. And in our comparisons with other people, we're trying to say, oh, that person's fatter than me, that makes me skinny. Oh, that person's skinnier than me, oh, I must be really fat. And so our own insecurities or securities are all fabrications out of these comparisons with other people, when I compare me to that person, I will come up with a third idea of what I really am, and that's not real. That's still not me. That's still just the product of the comparison between two things, and the product of comparison between two things, what we end up with there is different depending on what I'm comparing myself with. So if I'm comparing myself with someone who's really a clever artist and I'm looking at myself as an artist and I'm not very good at all, then if I'm identifying with that, then I'm comparing myself with that, and in identifying with that, I feel like I'm just not good enough. But if I'm then comparing myself with someone who I'm better at doing something than they are, then in that comparison and identifying with this who I am, this role play of me, which is really only the superficial level of me, when I'm identifying with that and I can see that I'm better than that person, then I feel wonderful for a moment. But it doesn't last. It doesn't last because it's only superficial. And underneath that, I'm not the same on the inside as what I am on the outside. And when a person is not the same on the inside as what they are on the outside, they're living a lie. They're not deliberately living a lie, but they've got no other choice. They don't understand they're living a lie. They don't know this torment that they're causing themselves through trying to be so better, so good, so right, so important, so superior on the outside, which is really determined by how unimportant, how insecure, how damaged they are on the inside. And all of this makes up our persona. So we look back through our life, and what are we looking at? We're looking at the story of our life. The good news is we are not a story. You are not a story. I am not a story. Yeah, the story is not us, but what we have done, what we have shared with other people, and the way those stories and that sharing made us feel at those times. And the way it made us feel at those times, let's say the way we feel with our mother or the way we felt with our father, this forms a feeling that we think is us. That's our identity with that person. That's how what we become, and how it feels to be us with different people throughout our life is the identity and the association that we have with those people. And so those people become a part of the reinforcement of this identity, a part of the reinforcement of actually how it feels to be us at that time. That's not even real. That's still part of the story. It's still a product and a result of the story. And whatever we learn to think, the thoughts that go on inside of us, how we identify with those thoughts about us, how we feel when we think that way about us, how we associate with those thoughts about us, that is how we are identified with those thoughts. And those thoughts, again, are just the beginnings of the story that becomes our thoughts, our words, and our actions and our interactions, and the result of all that, the way in which our life has turned out today. So this emotionalism, this nostalgia that we have with different stories at different times in our life brings back this feeling of familiarity, and we think that's us, but that's not us. That's still part of the story. And that part of the story, how it feels to be us in any situation throughout our life, that's only still there as a nostalgia because we have continued to re-identify with those things in a search to find what it is to be us, in a search to maintain some sense of identity because we're feeling at a loss. Because without that, we don't know what we are. And that's the problem. We know who we are. We know all about the who. It goes on and on and on. It's a nostalgia that's repetitive throughout our life that actually leads to a deterioration of our brain. It damages our brain to constantly remember who we are and to constantly regurgitate the story and the nostalgias and the feelings that come with that we call ourselves. This is not ourselves at all. So we lose touch with what we are, what we began as, and that is a living sensory being, a body, a human being that has within them the intelligence to function in this world right up to the point they start thinking about themselves And then that intelligence is interfered with. Our interpretation of ourselves and of the world kicks in once we start to learn to think about ourselves. And then we have perception. And perception is the trap. Perception is just the ideas we have about others and the world around us. It's not our sensory intelligence in receptivity to knowing those people, that world, exactly as it is. And we know that before thought becomes involved, as we know ourselves. So knowing ourselves is not a state of thinking. We only know the story of ourselves. So there's a big difference between knowledge, which is everything we've gathered in thoughts about ourselves along the way and about the world along the way. That's our knowledge. There's a huge difference between knowledge and knowing. The knowing sense of ourselves is derived in and from what we are in the sense of ourselves in our body at each and every second of our existence. And the knowledge about ourselves has been borrowed from everybody else and everything else and what we've read in a book and we've learnt from someone else along the way. And all of that is garbage. And that garbage has got to go. It becomes obsolete as we live, but we hang on to it. We hang on to it. So mechanical knowledge and mechanical information, yes, we need that for day-to-day life. But once we get involved in all of this nostalgic identification with the stories of our life at the different intervals of our life along the way, we have to start seeing that we've been many different people along the way. What we were at 20 is not what we were at 40 and not what we felt like at 60 and definitely not what we felt like at 80. Although I haven't got to 80 yet, I've only got to 65. But that's still giving me a story that's quite long. And that story of me, of the persona of me, God, how many personas have I been? I was a monk once and now I can't stand that stuff. It's just spiritual nonsense. But when I was a monk, I totally believed in that. I was totally identified with the persona of the monk until the persona of the monk disappeared. When that disappeared, I was no longer identified with it. And I could, at that point, could see it for what it really was. I was like, I started scratching my head. I was embarrassed to think that I was so stupid to have been drawn into all of those ridiculous perceptions and ideas and beliefs that were themselves nothing at all. They're just another story. A story in which to interpret myself and the world around me according to that story. When I already underneath that was the only real understanding of myself and the world around me was at the level of sensation. So that knowing sense in the body is not made of thinking. It's not made up of the story. That knowing sense of the body is a sense of knowing. When you really know the environment you're in, it's because you feel it in your body. When you know you're hungry, it's because you feel it in your body. When you know someone is lying to you, but you can't see how or why, you feel that in your body. When you walk out the door and you forget something, and you feel, I've forgotten something, that's a knowing in your body. And until you remember cognitively what that something was, that knowing of having forgotten something will annoy you, will agitate you until you recall it. Once you recall it, it's like, I've got it now. And this is how thinking comes from sensation. All thinking begins with this heightened intelligence of the body. So thinking is not intelligence. Thinking is not wisdom. Nothing derived and expressed as a thought is any longer wisdom or intelligence. Okay, there's intelligence in the information of the mechanical needs of our life. Yeah, a person who can repair a car is an intelligent person so far as repairing the car is concerned. But what I'm talking about is intelligence about ourselves. And what we need to be able to do is live beyond this misery of comparison, beyond this misery of competing with other people. On the superficial level of the world, this confusion that people have in the world, where they're thriving on black and white thinking because of their insecurities. So we can't look outside of that box, because if we look outside of that box, we'll discover what we don't know. We'll discover that what we were thinking inside of that box isn't all there is to it. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that because inherently outside of that box of our persona, of our story, of what we have made up about ourselves to try and feel some sense of security outside of that box, we are completely lost. We are at odds. We are empty. We are not that bright at all. So we have to go deeper. So living in the world, in the world of insecurities, in the world of black and white thinking, in the world of comparisons, you are only affected by that when you don't have your own sense of what you are in the body. Now, the sense of what you are has got nothing to do with who you are. Who you are is a story made up of thinking and nostalgia. What you are has been the same all the way along. And that is your own sense, your gut sense, your true sense, your physical sense. Let's call it that. It's much more simple. The physical sensations of what it feels like to be you in the body of you. And why have you lost touch with that? Because in that you have your pain, in that you have your disturbances, in that you have your fears, in that you have feelings of insecurity that are there to be resolved, not there as part of what it is to be you, but part of the influence on what it has been to what it is to be you. So feeling all of that regains your own solid sense of you, understanding that whatever you feel, whatever sensation you feel in the body of you is never ever wrong. This is not wrong. This is just a myth and a confusion that's been brought to the world through the psychiatrists of the world, that anger is wrong, that different behaviors are wrong. None of the feelings you have inside of yourself are wrong. The feelings you have in the body of you are there to be felt, and if you feel them, they will sort themselves out, because only the body can sort out its own disturbances. You can't sort them out through thinking. It's through thinking and disassociating from what we are into who we think we are that has caused all of our problems, all of our insecurities, and all of our tendencies to get caught up in the comparisons and with the bullies and the dominators of society. Now, this is your role play, and that's okay. But if you identify with that, if you're relying on these roles in your life to feel good about yourself, to feel positive about yourself, to feel solid in yourself, you are mistaken. Don't rely on that. That's not what they are for. They are just what you are doing. They are your skill set. But your skill set may be very, very high, very, very good, and it makes you feel a certain way, makes you feel good about yourself. But be careful of that, because that's a nostalgia. That's an artificial identification with a skill set just to feel good about yourself, which is actually avoiding how you really feel inside yourself. And you need to go deeper into that to resolve that. When you stop avoiding your insecurity, you start to enter into the pain of the depths of you, and what has really brought about that insecurity in your life has been how you've been treated throughout your life and not resolved inside of yourself along the way. So to get back into this sense of yourself, of what it really is to be you, you have to feel those sensations when they're triggered as reactions in the world of comparisons, in the world of hierarchy, in the world of people trying to dominate and influence and crawl over the top of one another and stand on the heads of others. In that world, you can be in that world, but it won't affect you when you're not relying on finding a strong sense of yourself from being in that world. Just be in that world. What is it? It's just artificial. It's not what we are at all. It's just what we've done and what we do every day of our life. It's just the ideas that people get about themselves. So when you see someone's a real bully, understand that inside they're just a frightened little girl or a frightened little boy. When you see someone's really, really confident on the outside, what are they making up for on the inside? Guaranteed 99 out of 100 times that person won't be the same on the inside as they are on the outside. So they are a divided, insecure person. They're a divided person who's not grounded in reality at all. So they create this artificial reality of the story of their life, and they get involved in that to such an extent that they don't even know. They don't know where they're coming from anymore. They don't know why they're doing what they're doing. They don't know why they want what they want. They don't know what's driving them. So what is driving us? What's driving us is all of these effects of the stories of our life along the way, and more than that too. You know, from generations after generation after generation, we have been taught and told so many things that we've taken in. It's been passed on from generation to generation. And that's driving us from how it feels to be us into the thoughts, words, and actions that come out of that feeling. That's the driving force, the way it feels to be us. To negate that driving force is possible, but it's not actually necessary, only to an extent. To the extent that you get caught up in it, that needs to be negated. So coming back to the sense of yourself in the body and feeling that driving force of trying to be better or trying to outdo someone or feeling insecure around someone else, that insecurity is what you need to resolve. Not anything else. That insecurity. And how are you going to resolve that? Not by being better than them. You're going to resolve that by realizing that's just my role play. That's just my job. That's just the thing I do. It's not what I am. What I am right now is feeling a bit insecure. Feeling that insecurity is your pathway into the solid sense of yourself, of what it is to be you, what you began as when you were born, a living, breathing organism. And in that, in the sense of you, the sense before thinking is where you will find what it is to be you. And you'll know that because you'll feel that in the body of you. And that solid sense of yourself, you recover that in the body of you. Just in the feeling of what it is to be you, not the story, which is the who it is to be you. There is no who. It's just a story. There is only what. And this what it is to be you, is only here for the term of its life, of its natural life. And that's perfectly fine to what you are. The story of who you are may want to live on forever. Come back to what you are, and you'll discover in what you are, you're not concerned about that. If you're really living your life, you're full on living your life. Living your life means, can you be what you are on the inside and be the expression of that on the outside? Even when you're playing the role of comparison, even when you're playing these roles in life, in your corporate world, in your material world, whatever it happens to be, play that role, but you don't have to lose or disconnect from your sense of yourself on the inside to do that. When that sense of yourself is there on the inside, you can enter into any type of interaction, any type of situation, and not lose that. Then you won't be thrown around by the world as you were before that, as you were before. So you need that sense of yourself, and that comes from the natural meditation of the body. The more time you spend just in the sense of yourself, whether it's uncomfortable or comfortable is irrelevant, whatever it is inside of you to be you, not what you think about that, but what it actually feels like to be that. Being with the feeling of that not only recovers any residue from the effects of your life, but it deepens your sense of yourself, which is unique to you and only you, which will be deepened by you simply being with however it feels in the body of you. And that is your foundation, and that is your anchor in reality. And that's how you began when you were just a little baby. You had it all then. You had it all when you were born complete. And you were born complete. We all were. That was our perfect moment. And then we messed it up by the way we learned to think about ourselves. And all those thoughts about ourselves are not about ourselves at all. They're just what other people taught us to think about ourselves. All the things we want are not what we want at all. They're just things we've been taught to want. Do you really know what you want? Come back to the sense of yourself, and you'll discover fulfillment in yourself that is already there. And that fulfillment that's already there is your passion. That becomes your passion for life. Yeah. If you don't have that sense of yourself in the body, you won't have passion. The more you lose touch with yourself, the more you'll find it difficult to feel passion in what you're doing. Whatever you're doing is fine. Whatever you're doing in life. We all do different things. There's nothing wrong with anything any one of us do for a living or are doing for our job. That's what we do. But when we can do that by putting ourselves, our sense of ourselves into everything we do, when we can make everything we do connect with everything we are, when who we are remains connected with what we are, then who we are is just this expression into the world of what we sense ourselves to be. And that's where you're going to gain your passion. And also being with that, any disturbance or any hurt or any trauma that's unresolved, you're going to find that in your body as well. And healing that by being with that is also how you recover your passion for life. And your passion for life is your energy for life. And your energy for life doesn't care. Your passion doesn't care what it does. It's not that you have a passion for a particular thing that you do, a passion for surfing or a passion for gardening. You think you have a passion for those things, but those things you think you have a passion for are simply the things that you are able to let go of the story of yourself in and just come from yourself as you are. Just be the animal that you are in doing those things. And that's why you have a passion for them, because they allow you to fully express or more fully express you into doing those things. So just express you into doing whatever you're doing. Whatever you're doing. No matter how menial the task is, no matter how complicated the task is, express you into that task. So it's a very different question, what I am and who I am. They're very, very different questions. What we are is this living organism. And we were born as this, born to be the unique individual we are. And we can only find that uniqueness in the sense of ourself in the body. And who we are, well, there isn't really a who, is there? That's what we made up along the way. Our personas, our behaviors, and our sense of identifying with through nostalgia with any part of that story. That's just what we got to get over. And when we get over that, we mature into a fully matured human being. And a fully matured human being isn't concerned at all about who they are in society or in the eyes of others or in their own eyes. They're only interested in what they are and how that is right now, and responding to that and being that, being the same on the inside as they express themselves on the outside. If you want to take this further, I have put together a very informative meditation healing app to heal you of these confusions that I've been exposing in this talk today and more. So you can download that and take this journey further if you wish to, if you find it interesting for you. Thanks for joining me today. If this talk resonated with you or helped you in any way at all, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the talk with your friends so that they can get the benefit as well. Okay, bye for now.